Hey animal enthusiasts, it's Joel here again, and today we're going to be talking about Protochordates and Cyclostomes. Let's get into it. The first animals we're going to go over are Cephalochordates. This is Amphioxus, also commonly known as lancelets. These animals have an elongate body and swim similar to that of a fish. This is because of their stiff-like flexible rod of tissue called the notochord. The notochord is a chordate synapomorphy and extends all the way to the front of the animal, which is known as the rostrum, to the end. When looking at a cross-section view of the Amphioxus, you can see that the notochord is surrounded by a sheath of connected tissue and attached to it paired segmentedly arranged muscle masses. These are called myomeres. The myomeres are separated from the other by the connective tissue, which is known as myoseptum or myosepta. This allowed for a smooth bending of the body during swimming and most likely represents the original mode of locomotion for vertebrates. Other important factors for swimming are the fins. Amphioxus has unpaired fins that can be seen as continuous fold of tissue along the middle of the back as the dorsal fin and around the tail as the caudal fin. They also have another along the midventral line called the ventral fin. When looking at the ventrolateral surface in front of the atriopore, there are paired folds of tissue, which is called the metropleural folds. These are seen to be the evolutionary precursors for paired fins of vertebrates. When looking at the anterior end of the Amphioxus, you will find the oral hood. This is a funnel-like structure in the front of the mouth. The front of the funnel has oroceri or cirrus, which are sensory structures that can detect material in the water as it moves along the front of the animal. In the back of the oral hood, there is a vertical sheet of tissue called the velum, which has a hole in it that is constantly open. This is the mouth. On each side of the oral hood, there are ciliated structures called the wheel organ. By using its cilia, the wheel organ moves water through the oral hood and into the mouth. This eventually leads into the long space called the pharynx. When looking at the cross-section view of the Amphioxus, you can more easily see the pharynx and the structures associated with it. Along the pharynx walls, there are pharyngeal bars which are separated by narrow spaces called pharyngeal slits, which is a chordate synapomorphy. The pharyngeal bars and pharyngeal slits will eventually evolve into the gill bars and gill slits of aquatic vertebrates today. The pharynx will extend posteriorly until it starts to narrow, eventually reaching the beginning of the esophagus. Amphioxus is a filter feeder and feeds by filtering out food particles from the water that goes through the mouth and passes through the pharyngeal slits into the atrium. It then goes outside through the atriopore. The endostyle, which is a chordate synapomorphy, contains cilia which move mucus back into the esophagus and through the intestine. The intestine is where digestion occurs and eventually ends at the anus. The portion of the body posterior to the anus is also known as a postanal tail, which is a chordate synapomorphy. Another chordate synapomorphy is the dorsal hollow nerve cord, which is above the notochord. Here it contains light-sensitive photoreceptors. Above the pharynx, there is the epibranchial groove with a pair of small dorsal aortae. The small dorsal aortae are responsible for carrying blood back to the rest of the body from the pharynx. Because Amphioxus doesn't have a heart, the blood is propelled by contractions of the ventral aorta, which is found beneath the endostyle. Another major organ is the hepatic cecum, which is thought to be the precursor for the liver. After cephalochordates are the urochordates. These include tunicates. Tunicates are filter feeders that are found among tropical coral reefs. Although they may look like sponges, they actually exhibit all 5 chordate synapomorphies, primarily in the planktonic stage. The adults only retain the pharyngeal slits and endostyle. There has been much debate over which is the more related sister taxa to vertebrates, but based on DNA analysis in 2006, it was found that cephalochordates are actually the outgroup. I won't go into too much detail about tunicate physiology, but it's not surprising as to why the first hypothesis was that Urochordates was the outgroup to cephalochordates and vertebrates. Going off of morphology, that leads us to our next clade, the cyclostomes. This clade consists of hagfish and lampreys, both of which share a synapomorphy of having keratinized teeth and a long eel-like body. Characteristics of the hagfish are that they have no jaws, a circular mouth, no paired appendages, and they have vestigial eyes and external gill slits. Then we have the lamprey, which has no jaws, a sucker mouth with sharp teeth, no paired appendages, and 7 external gill slits. An important aspect of the lamprey is its larval stage. This is called ammocoete. It has a body form and lifestyle very similar to that of Amphioxus. The same chordate structures can also be seen, which includes the notochord, nerve cord, gill bars and slits, and the postanal tail. The front portion of the nerve cord has developed into a brain with 3 distinct lobes. At the front of the brain is the median nostril, which is connected to the most anterior lobe of the brain called the olfactory lobe. The second lobe is called the optic lobe, which has a pair of eyes on each side. Behind this is the hindbrain, which has a pair of otic vesicles on each side. The most anterior end of the animal is the oral hood, which has oral papillae. Behind this, there is a pair of curved muscular valve-like structures that make up the velum. These valves beat to produce a current of water into the pharynx. In the pharynx, the water passes out through the 7 pairs of internal gill slits, into the gill pouches, and then outside through the external gill slits. The gill bars are homologous to pharyngeal bars and are vascularized for gas exchange. Gill slits are homologous to pharyngeal slits. At the bottom of the pharynx is the endostyle, which has mucus that traps food particles from the water current and leads it to the esophagus by ciliary action from the mid-ventral and mid-dorsal ciliated ridge. The endostyle will eventually become the thyroid gland in the adult lamprey and is a precursor for the thyroid gland of other vertebrates, making it homologous. The pharynx will eventually narrow to form the esophagus, and this will lead to the intestine. The intestine eventually leads into the anus. Ammocoetes also possess a true heart, which is located behind the pharynx. It has a ventral aorta which carries deoxygenated blood into the pharynx and branches off into afferent branchial arteries to the gill arches and gill lamellae. From there, the blood drains into the efferent branchial arteries into the dorsal aorta, which carries oxygenated blood to the various parts of the body. So yeah guys, that's basically the rundown of major protochordates and cyclostome physiologies. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.